Okay, welcome back to our exciting discussions of the Persians and the Greeks. So now we're going to look at a series of conflicts. First, the wars between the Persians and the Greeks, and then amongst the Greeks themselves. So let's jump in. Okay, so here is a handy map that you can commit to memory if you would like. So all kind of the nitty-gritty details down here. But this is the area of the world we've been looking at, right? We've been talking about the the Persian Empire moving in, and as they moved further here, right, they started to come into contact with some of the Greek colonies out here, and then eventually they'll move in to fight Greece more directly. Okay, and then Macedonia, just remember that for later. Okay, so some background. As the Persians are moving in, right, the Greeks are fighting back. The Persians will demand surrender of Athens and Sparta, right, two of the most powerful city-states, and of course they refuse. And I should say that the Persian War, I should say wars, right, this is going to be over kind of the course of 20 years. So take a look at some of these stats, if you will, for both the Athenians, right? They're going to decide to take on the Persians, and remember our friend Darius then is going to lead this invasion. And so you can see some kind of opposites here, and then we'll look at some pictures of some of these in a second. And here is some pottery here of both the Persian and the Greek soldiers fighting here. Okay, so we've got right, no cavalry. This is mostly naval, right, coming in. Okay, so here's some pictures. So this is kind of what the Greeks, maybe their innovation, if you will, in fighting, the phalanx. And so you could see with their swords and shields, that was a pretty fearsome combination. So they moved tightly together, and this became quite powerful in the ancient world fighting technique. And remember the hoplites, the soldiers who would, outside of Sparta, I should say, could be farmers who were asked to defend their city-state when they needed to. So everyone had to be willing to fight. And then I found some cool stuff from a Greek museum, some actual hoplite armor. Okay, so here's some Persian armament. It was harder to find some good pictures, so you had some modern reconstructions. But here's some Median soldiers in the Iranian on the right, and this is found at Persepolis. And so here's a Persian ship, what they would have looked like, right? And then the cavalry, of course, on the horses. So these battles are, the war is known from some of its famous battles. And the first one, I'll talk about each battle, and then we'll look at some maps. So the first one is the Battle of Marathon. So some background here is that the Persians attack Marathon, which is 26 miles, give or take, from Athens. And the Athenian army is about a third the size of the Persian army. And so they duke it out, right? And the Athenians encircle the Persian forces, preventing this surprise attack. And you can see this is a big deal, right? They're outnumbered, but the Athenians survive. And so this guy runs from Marathon to Athens and says, "Rejoice, we have conquered," and then he dies. So he's able to speed back to Athens to tell the Athenians that they have won, and this is why we should never run marathons, am I right? And so, because you could die. Important consequence then is the myth of Persian invincibility is broken, right? So this powerful empire force that we talked about in the last video, it looks like maybe they can be stopped. Okay, so After this, it takes a while for the Persians to regroup, and so we have then battle number 2. And this is then Xerxes is going to try and do what his predecessor could not. So the Persians then are moving into Greece, and they're going to attack a narrow pass known as Thermopylae. And so 7,000 Greeks are going to try to delay them at the pass. So they know that they can't exactly stop them, but they're hoping that by delay, the Athenians and others can get their acts together. And of these 7,000 Greeks, 300 of them are Spartans. And so this probably would have worked. Alas, a traitor sneaks over to the Persians and helps them around the pass behind the Greek army. So once they realize this, those 300 Spartans decide to stay, knowing that they're going to probably give their life for this, to allow the other Greeks to go back and help. So they are able to hold the Persians for 3 days, but ultimately all 300 Spartans perish. And then the Persians then in response would burn Athens to the ground. So it's important, probably mostly it's famous for the heroic nature of the 300 Spartans. And we've been, of course, making the movie 300 jokes. But it is a great story, and this will stick with a lot of the Greeks, the sacrifice of the Spartans. Okay, important battle 3 and 4. So the Athenians then realize they can't probably defeat the Persians in Athens, so they fake a retreat, and that's what allows the Persians to burn Athens. And they lead this, so this is a naval battle, into the Strait of Salamis. Ultimately, the Athenian navy is victorious because this pass, or this Salamis, is so narrow that the Greek ships are tinier than the Persians, and so they're able to weave in and out. And the Persian ships are stuck, and they're too big enough to really turn quickly or maneuver well. And so, hooray, the Athenian navy is victorious. So then, a little bit later, we're going to fight one more battle here at Plataea. And this time, the Persians will separate the Greeks from their provisions, right? And they're going to do some stuff to try to get at each other. And what's interesting here, remember we've been talking about the Greek city-states are usually kind of separate entities, but in this case they came together and they were able to unite to defeat the Persians. So hooray, the evil Persians, which we've now learned, not that bad, right, lose and retreat. So it's a pretty big deal, right, because nobody else has been able to stop the Persians. So the big consequence here, the Persians are unable to kind of bring the Greeks into their empire and into their culture. So here are some maps here that we've been talking about, the Battle of Marathon, and then Plataea here, and then of course the Battle of Thermopylae up close. So feel free to take a minute, take it all in, give you a visual of what we've been talking about. So what's important about the Persian Wars? I think this, of course, kind of reaffirmed the Greek sense of superiority and uniqueness. And we see then the rise of Athens. So Athens will begin to dominate the Aegean area. And this then leads to kind of the Athenian Golden Age that we've been talking about. And they create the Delian League to combat the Persians. And then ultimately, right, Athens will take leadership of that. And part of the problem then leads to the Peloponnesian War, is because other city-states are not too happy about Athens becoming the big boss and letting it get to their heads. So let's jump then over to the Peloponnesian Wars. So these also are a series of wars that will last probably 30 years. And so this is kind of dangerous, right? So think of all the time we've been talking about life expectancy and stuff, and fighting a lot, doesn't help. So we'll talk about the alliances between the two great city-states, those who try to stay neutral, give you a sense here of what we'll be talking about. So, like I said, many of the city-states are going to resent Athenian power, and so to counter their powerful Delian League, Sparta and the rivals will form the Peloponnesian League. In case you're wondering, this is the Peloponnesus. And so they both decide to press for war because they each think, yeah, we're pretty tough, right? Athens is like, we've got an awesome navy. Sparta's like, yeah, well, we've got a great army. So they think they can do this quickly. Alas, for the people, it's not true. So major events. So there's kind of three phases, if you can tell by my handy marks here. The first phase is Sparta declares war, invades Athens, and the Athenians, they bring in everybody inside the walls. And we'll talk about one of the great leaders of Athens, Pericles, kind of becomes kind of a hero here. So he brings everybody within the walls. But unfortunately, this plague breaks out. It kills a third of the population, and including Pericles. So they kind of are able to hold off. They declare a truce for a little while. And we move on to the pink phase here. So after a while then, Athens decides to hit Syracuse, which is in what is today Italy, or Sicily in Italy, an island off of Italy. And it's a disaster. So Syracuse is Sparta's wealthiest ally, and Athens is just crushed. However, we move into phase 4. Athens is able, for some reason, to live on to fight another day. But this time, Sparta makes friends with Persia and ultimately defeats Athens. So what is so important about this war? Well, Sparta wins. And this kind of brings about the end of Athenian golden age. And so democratic government and kind of all the good times when you have, if you're at the height of your civilization, you get to ponder deep thoughts and have a luxury of democracy, but that starts to suffer. However, despite the end of the golden age, kind of some of the great philosophers come out of this period as they question life, question things around them. We'll talk more about that in class. And Greece then becomes vulnerable to the Macedonian invasion. And so we'll stay tuned to our next video that will look at that. But we're remember when I point on the map, Macedonia is there just above Greece. And we'll talk about Philip and, of course, dun, 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 dun. Wait for it. Uh-oh, where's my picture? Just kidding. I guess I lost it. I had a cool picture of Alexander the Great, but that's where we lead to. And Greece then becomes vulnerable to their invasion. And I was trying to triumphantly enter in Alexander, but I guess I lost him. Okay, in conclusion, right, over these series of decades, they only have a brief period of peace between the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars, probably, 50 years or so, maybe 70, and so you can see why this will take quite a toll on a lot of the Greek city-states.